For a long time after it was originally released, the Mercedes-Benz A-Class went pretty much unnoticed, being favoured by old people in the school brigade for their daily transport. But since its reinvention as a premium hatchback, it's got a lot of attention. And now, to go with its AMG version in the four-door coupe, it's going off-road. Well, sort of. The GLA is another rendition of the A-Class, touted by its maker as a more rugged version of a model that has so far produced some mixed results. The A45 AMG I alluded to isn't the best car in its class by some way, but the four-door CLA is a very nice car. The GLA is supposed to mix the same styles of cars that BMW did in their X6, just in a much smaller package. Mercedes-Benz talk about the SUV and the coupe elements of the styling of this car, but really, it's just an A-Class, just a bit bigger and a lot less generic. To compare it to something that's a bit more familiar, it's the same sort of idea as a BMW X1, just a lot less awkward. This car is far from awkward. It has great proportions and a particularly nice front end. Its SUV bits include scuff guards and a slightly raised stance, and in profile, the roofline gives it just a bit of an athletic look. It's all very Mercedes-Benz looking, without looking quite like anything else in the family, and without looking too disjointed either, despite the cues taken from very different types of cars. Whatever Mercedes-Benz design intentions for this car, the interior doesn't really match the rest of the package. Although that's not a bad thing. It might have SUV genes, but the cabin has been cut and pasted from the A-Class, so it's designed for everyday comfort. And it might have some coupe ideas, but there's still plenty of space. It's not the most inspiring place in the world, with a predominantly black colour scheme perforated by bits of satin chrome. But it is easy to use and it's comfortable. The tech is high, with the centre-mounted screen offering access to everything from the radio to the internet. The standard spec, though, isn't high. Our test car has manual aircon with all the really nice bits, sat-nav, panoramic roof, automated tailgate, being options. Luggage space is decent, with the option to fold down the rear seats, should you be travelling with the camera crew, for example. There will be a few engine options for the GLA, including diesel and petrol, with a 245 kilowatt AMG version as well. Our test car is the 200 CDI with 100 kilowatts and 300 Newton meters. And while that sounds a little meek, with this you actually get something for nothing. Because it only spews out 119 grams of CO2 per kilometre, this car is exempt from the ridiculous carbon emission tax. As far as the CO2 to power ratio goes, this motor is the winner amongst the three competing German manufacturers. Both Audi and BMW have diesels that put out less than 120 grams per kilometre, but none of their motors has as much power as this one. It was a little hard to judge how well this motor does. We were at the coast, which would have helped it slightly, but our test car had less than 1,000 kilometres on it. So it's best to sum it up like this. If you want your GLA with a bit of sportiness built in, well then maybe you shouldn't opt for the 2.2 litre turbo diesel. It's got decent power on an everyday basis, but it's just not that enthusiastic. Even in sport mode, it refuses to change gear at anything above 4,000 RPM, and even switching to the pedals doesn't make any difference. Spirited driving isn't what this particular GLA is about, an impression you get when you start it up and hear the distinctly unrefined diesel chomping away under the bonnet. The optional 7G DCT automatic gearbox works fine, but even though it has quick shifts and pretty decisive software, it doesn't really help with any sort of rapid progress. The real strength of the whole setup is what's underneath. If it was up to the suspension alone, this car would have zero SUV tendencies. It's set up to handle. There's a bit of body lean and a bit of understeer when you're really pushing it, but generally it's grippy with good steering. This thing would be enjoyable even if you never took it off-road. This is one of those chassis setups that outdoes the rest of the car's abilities, a good sign for those who are thinking about the GLA AMG. Across varying surfaces and on different types of routes, the GLA delivered the kind of confidence-inspiring drive that makes for real fun, despite the acceleration being somewhat of a party pooper. Let us not forget though, Mercedes-Benz has genuine off-road intentions for this car. Mercedes-Benz will be offering some of their GLA models with 4MATIC, which is their all-wheel drive system. And even though that will improve handling in the dirt, it's not a place you want to spend a lot of time on in this car, given the ride setup. Even with our test car's generous tyre profile, the hard suspension means you feel every bump. And the logical equation to that is, the bigger the wheel, the worse it'll get. That said, even our front-wheel drive test car did manage some off-road bits with surprising ease. It's not going to traverse the Gobi Desert, but it's got enough clearance to help you explore an off-road detour with some confidence. And where there's no all-wheel drive, there are some pretty impressive electronics. Noticeable enough so you can tell you're pushing the car to a point where it's not entirely comfortable, but effective enough to avoid insurance claims in those instances where grip is low and acceleration is a bit too enthusiastic. It's not Sebastian Loeb in a box, but it does a good job of keeping things in check. It's pretty easy to be skeptical of manufacturers and how they make up new model derivatives as they go along, with their performance SUVs and their four-door coupes, and now Mercedes-Benz with a premium hatchback semi-off-roader with coupe styling ideas. And although that may sound all over the place, the GLA with its good off-road ability, comfortable everyday drive and good looks is a very convincing package. The 2.2-litre turbo diesel is good enough for the daily drive, but is a little unenthusiastic when driving with intent. The 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox is the same. It's a good-looking car with a typical Mercedes-Benz interior, and it's surprisingly capable in rougher-than-usual conditions. Pity the motor doesn't match the chassis' potential.